Hey guys, what's going on? Andrew coming at you. And in this one, we're going to talk about my 3 top favorite Swedish companies. These are companies I believe are going to do really well over the long term, over the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not giving investment advice here. These are just companies I really like. I always am very impressed with Sweden being a country roughly around 10 million, a small country, I'd say, that they often lead the way in a lot of tech spaces and technology. And we're going to get into it. So let's talk about number 1, which has to be Saab. Now, when I was a kid, I only saw Saab cars, and so I thought they were just a car company that kind of went under after the 2009 collapse. But when I came to link shipping, it's impossible not to notice Saab and the fighter jets. It's where Saab's headquarters is here in Sweden. Now, Sweden being such a peaceful country, it's often strange but true that they're really good at making weapons as well. They're one of the largest weapons suppliers here in Europe. A lot of Saab's technology is used in weapon systems. They developed with the UK the NLAW, which has had a lot of success in Ukraine. This is the anti-tank weapon that is being used in Ukraine. And I'm sure that a lot of countries have seen the success of the NLAW, that they're also going to be able to make it better over the next couple years. And I would imagine a lot of countries would be interested in purchasing it. They also make the Gripen, which is often compared and competing with the F-35. Again, impressive. When you consider that the Gripen is compared to the F-35, keep in mind that Saab is going up against Lockheed Martin. And if you really think about the military-industrial complex in the U.S., how much money is spent? It is incredible that they were able to compete. I love the Gripen. I get to see it fly all the time when there's ever nice weather here in link shipping. And when I'm going on a run and those fighter jets are flying around, I get pumped. And I don't think a lot of people realize this. During the Cold War, Sweden had the 5th largest air force in the world. They've really often led the way here. What I like about the Gripen as well is it is a multi-purpose aircraft. It can do reconnaissance, it can do air-to-air, it can do air-to-ground, it can be a bomber as well. It can release a decent payload, it can carry a decent amount of weapons for its size. It's also a smaller target than the F-35, so maybe it's harder to hit. It's very versatile. It can take off with a very short runway. So in theory, you could maybe take off on a highway and land on a highway, which was one of the pros of this. And what I love about what Saab did was, Saab looked at the F-35, not that they knew the F-35 was coming out, but they looked at the Lockheed Martin, they looked at their tech, and they were like, there is no way that Sweden or Saab could ever compete with the stealth technology. The US is so far ahead when it comes to stealth than any other country, and it would probably bankrupt Saab to try to develop this technology, because Lockheed Martin and the F-35 program was so many countries were involved in making this tech. So they went the opposite route. They said, you know what? We are going to focus on the computer systems. And obviously they have a long-range missile. There's a lot of impressive things about the Saab. What makes this computer system so cool is that it can be easily updated very quickly over time and be made to be more efficient and better. Meaning that hypothetically, if you have the Gripen, it's going to be a better aircraft 5 years from now just based on the computer systems, which there's always the risk with the F-35 that radar systems are going to get better, that it will become obsolete. Unfortunately, Saab just recently lost a bid with Canada and Finland. To be fair in both those cases, I believe they were already using U.S. aircraft or U.S. fighter jets, so maybe it's just easier to just stick with the same systems. Saab's biggest customer right now is probably Brazil, but given everything happening in the world, I think a lot of people think that Saab's going to do quite well. Their stock price went up like 40% once the war in Ukraine started, and it's horrible that money can be made due to war, but I think it's an unnecessary evil that exists in our world. Unfortunately, we don't live in a peaceful world today, and there's a need to develop these systems, to develop these aircraft. The Gripen is often compared, again, to the F-35. It's considered to be a cheaper aircraft, and it is my personal opinion that the Gripen is best for smaller countries that can only afford one type of aircraft because it's multi-purpose. It's also cheaper to fly. But I understand why Canada would go with the stealth aircraft, because I believe Canada can afford a bunch of different aircraft. So I think if you can afford different ones, then you should go with that. I think that they're going to have a lot of success no matter what, because with Sweden joining NATO, they're going to have to increase their military spending. A lot of that is going to go towards Saab. It's obvious they're trying to recruit a lot more people into the Air Force right now. I just recently saw Top Gun, and the Swedish Air Force was outside recruiting. That's how good that movie is. So I think there's going to be a lot of growth here in Sweden. The company's only going to get bigger. and they're only going to keep leading the way in innovation. And again, I'm just really impressed that the F-35 is comparable to the Gripen. That's insane to me. Number two has to be Spotify. Now, hypothetically, when I was a kid, I would never do this, but hypothetically, let's say I hypothetically was pirating music, using things like Napster. That's right, that's how old I am. I hypothetically could have used Napster. A lot of millennials were just getting music for free. These iPods were coming out. I still remember having my first iPod, and you could just experience so many different types of songs, so many different types of music. And let's just say, hypothetically, me being a musician and a music major, it allowed me to discover so much types of music. Now, what I love what Spotify did is that often when people are using some type of new technology or that technology is illegal, usually the very old people that are not innovative just go after people with lawsuits. But Spotify saw something and said, you know what? People want to experience music digitally. And this is why I think it's so important. They were one of the first companies to move to digital streaming, and they were way ahead of their time. I still remember when Spotify came out, it was an invite-only system in the States. And then when I came to Sweden in 2012 and got my first smartphone, I decided to get into a Spotify subscription, and I have not looked back ever since. And the thing is, most millennials at the time when other downloading services were out, weren't spending any money on music. And what Spotify managed to do was find a happy medium where they get millennials to buy streaming service. The artists still get money. It's nowhere near the same amount of money, but they get a chance to discover more artists, more than they ever would have before. Spotify has had a lot of growth, and they just had recently, I think they IPO'd like 2 years ago. But what's incredible is they're expecting to get 10 times the growth over the next 10 years. We're talking almost 1 billion users. They acquired Joe Rogan, which, although he's controversial, he is a big name. At Spotify, I imagine they're going to bring a lot more people in. I think that Spotify is leading the way when it comes to podcasting. And although they have plenty of competitors, I wouldn't switch to Apple Music personally because I just love the way Spotify works. I love the tech of Spotify. I love the playlist system. And I'm just a loyal user to Spotify. I don't see any reason to go anywhere else. And they've really led the way there with tech. And I'm excited to see what they do in the future. And then finally, we got to talk about Volvo. Now, I think Volvo is going to do very well over time. And I'm super excited to see what they do in the EV vehicle space, or the electric vehicle space. I think they're going to do a great job. To be fair, though, the markets have been hammered, and the car business has been hammered a lot because they're unable to build like new vehicles right now. Basically, with China shutting down, there was a huge computer shortage, plus the demand for computer chips went up. So a lot of these vehicles can't run without the computer chips. So they're just having a hard time building the cars right now. I do believe with China opening up now, they're going to be able to do it. The only problem in the short term is I believe we're entering a recession, and there's not going to be a lot of cash on hand, a lot of free cash for people to buy cars right now. So I think it's going to be a rough couple years for Volvo. But it's going to be that way for all car manufacturers. And as soon as the economy starts to pick up, I think there's going to be a ton of people spending and buying vehicles. And just given everything that's happening in the world with Russia and Ukraine, you're going to see a lot of European countries moving more to EV vehicles. And one thing I can tell you if you own a Volvo is that thing will drive well in the winter. I mean, it is manufactured and tested here in Sweden. It's a great vehicle to have, to drive in the winter, to drive in the woods, off-road a little bit. I'm not saying you should go off-road and like go quickly, but it can handle itself very well, and it's always been marketed as like a great family vehicle. And I'm excited to see what they do, and I think it's a good long-term play. So again, this isn't like investment advice necessarily. These are just companies I like that I'm excited to see. I'm not necessarily invested in any of these companies myself. I'm excited to see what these three companies do in the future. Do you agree with me? What other Swedish companies do you think are fantastic or great? I would love to look into them more and talk about them. Just let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next video. Hej då!